welcome back to Cindy's Library, and I am here to talk about what I have read in the first part of the month of March. Now, there are some things I read that were not for middle grade March, so we will start with those. First of all, I read Ion, which is a dialogue between Socrates, of course, and what is his name? Anyway, the guy he talks to is a great orator. Not in the political sense necessarily, but maybe a dramatist might be a better way of putting it, since he absolutely loves to recite Homer, and he's very good at it. In fact, he just won an award for doing that. And so he gets into a conversation with Socrates about the nature of art and whether it's talking through knowledge or inspiration. Rather interesting. Not a bad place to start with Plato just because it is so short. I think it's only 15 pages in here. So there is that. Let's see. Oh, I finally finished Romola. Oh, Romola. This is a bit different from George Eliot's regular work in that instead of the not too far distant English countryside, which is where we have mostly been with Silas Marner, Middlemarch, Adam Bede, and Daniel Deronda, this is set in Renaissance Florence. So the Medici family has recently been expelled from the city, so lots of political turmoil. And to the midst of this, we have a young man named Tito who arrives in the city. He managed to, he was with his father on a journey, got attacked by pirates. Basically, his father got taken. He managed to escape. Whether his father is still alive or not is a good question at the beginning of the book. So he meets the people of Florence, especially Romola. Tito gets introduced to her father, who's a blind scholar, and since Tito is also rather scholarly, has been fully educated, they meet, they start working together. He falls in love with Romola. Of course, there's another girl, Tessa, that he also meets who influences his life. And Savonarola is also around. He's a zealous reformer in Florence at this time, a real-life figure, and he influences things as well. But one decision that is not, shall we say, ideal leads to another for Tito, and in the midst of this, politics of Florence are brewing, and yeah, I rather enjoyed this. I really did. Took a little bit to start, but I'm glad I read it. Let's see, I also read The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. It's been made into a movie. It's fairly well regarded, and I can see why. This is about Liesel Memminger. She is separated from her mother and sent to live with a foster mother. And the reason why can be summed up in one word: communist, because this is Nazi Germany, and her little brother dies on the way to where she's handed over to the foster people. And in fact, we start with the character named Death, and he really is Death. Not omnipotent, not all-knowing, or anything like that, but he does know about people. He is curious about people, and he certainly has the power to fulfill his role, shall we say. Anyway, Death encounters Liesel 3 times, and we do get all 3 times here, starting with the death of her brother. And Death checks in on her every once in a while. Well, hence the 3 times. Beyond that, though, Death learns Liesel's story. Like I said, this is Nazi Germany. Liesel is 10 when this starts. We have her adjusting to her new home, her new neighborhood, which takes a bit. But of course, as events go on, war begins, and then the war increases and becomes bad. And probably should leave that there as far as actual plot points to start out with. One interesting thing, though, is to look at what it was like within Nazi Germany and not being a Jew. I mean, you have the lady on the corner who has a store who's totally for Hitler. But you have the quiet tailor whose son Rudy Liesel makes friends with. Well, frenemies, mostly friends. And he is a quiet man. He just doesn't want trouble. And then you have Liesel's new papa, who is, he doesn't particularly like what's going on. And you have the bully in the Nazi youth group, and you have good delinquents and bad delinquents, the mayor's wife, and the strict nuns at school, and everyone in between, most of whom are just trying to survive. That is probably the best part of this. One note about this is there is a lot of swearing in it. Now, to be fair, more often than not, I think it's basically them calling each other various forms of swine in German, but that isn't everything, all the swearing in here. So, just so you know. One other thing, if I can find it. We have some pictures in here. And I guess that comes to the part where for the reason why this is called the Book Thief. And that is because when Liesel first arrives at Himmel Street, she is illiterate. She slowly learns to read, becomes fascinated by words. She's very poor, even if it wasn't Nazi Germany, so books are few and far between. Her papa does manage to find her a couple at one point, but mostly Leslie steals her books because she can't help it. She has to have books to read. Which is a fascinating idea. I can definitely have some sympathy for that. All right, and most everything else, I believe, is middle grade March. So, I read The Tale of Despereaux by DiCamillo, which was totally adorable. It is a tale of a tiny mouse who is touched by music, falls in love with a princess, and He's just so sweet and courageous in spite of being tiny even for a mouse. And it's also the story of the princess, and it's a story of a rat who wants light but lives in darkness. And it is a story of a maid who no one has ever treated well, and how all these things collide together. This one too, if I can find them, has illustrations as well. Oh, so adorable, a mouse falling in love with a princess, which of course is a thing unheard of. You can see why it won a Newbery medal. And also by DiCamillo, I got the Beatrix prophecy. This is the story of Beatrix. When we first encounter her, she doesn't remember who she is. She is befriended by a stubborn old goat and by a monk with a wandering eye and with a brave boy, and also with a man who used to be king. But the main story is Beatrix. Like I said, she doesn't remember who she is. She just appears at the monastery one day with only remembering her name and nothing else. And the way she arrives, it's clear something is going on. And one thing they quickly learn is that Beatrix, she can read and write. And this is in a world where girls and women are not allowed to read or write. And things go on from there. Yes. We also learned there is a prophecy about that seems, well, at least seems to indicate Beatrix. So, let's see. I also read The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse, which is absolutely amazing. And indeed, it's not exactly a linear story. It's more like snippets on every page or two, with all of them learning various things. And indeed, there is a boy who meets a mole, and then a fox and a horse. They all have distinctive personalities. It's very, very sweet. I also read Big Panda and Tiny Dragon, which is equally adorable. You can see examples of the pictures, and this is in a similar vein. Let's see. Are you ever mean to yourself, Big Panda? Big Panda watched a ripple spread across the lake. I see how gentle you are, Tiny Dragon, and try to treat myself with the same kindness. So things like that. Again, absolutely adorable. Okay, and let's see, what did I read? I read Cymboline, A Kitten's Tale by Emma Stewart. This is volume 2 of Cymboline's adventures, and I want to say it's winter and spring, or fall and winter. It's definitely winter because there's Christmas in it. Just absolutely adorable again. I read All of a Kind Family by Sydney Taylor. This is in the same vein as many books I could talk about, Reminds me a bit of Anne of Green Gables, or more closely Little House on the Prairie, except this is New York City at the beginning of the 20th century. And this family is poor. The father, he basically owns and manages a junk shop. People bring in junk, he sells it, because one person's junk, of course, is another person's potential treasure, or at least something useful. So, not rich, and he has a family of 5 girls, and a wife, of course, but 5 girls. And so we learn about life in the big city, we get the 4th of July, we go to the library. They're also Jewish, so we have a number of Jewish holidays, which is rather fun. Very, very sweet. The Miscalculations of Lightning Girl by Stacy McAnulty. So this starts with, I forget her name, but when she was about 7, 8, I want to say, she didn't get struck by lightning directly per se, but I think it was she was touching a metal fence or something like that. So anyway, she indirectly got struck by lightning. And ever since then, uh, she is brilliant at math. She can do the most complex of equations, easily college level, if not more. And at the same time, she's not been quite the same. She struggles socially. She's actually been homeschooled for the past 4 years. But her grandma, who she lives with, makes her promise to go to middle school / high school. I think she's in 7th grade for 1 year to see how that goes, even though she's doing college level mathematics. And she is not enthusiastic about this at all. It starts out just as horribly as she thought it would. But as she does go on, she starts making friends, starts adjusting to school life and social opportunities. She's extremely worried about how her peers will look at her if they know how brilliant she is at math. So, and this has a specific name. I should have written that down too, what this girl has. But I enjoyed it more than I thought I would, so I'll definitely have to give it that. Next, we have a Rover story by Jasmine Warga. So here we have a rover named Resilience, and Resilience, well, we start with him still being worked on, uh, being put together, taken apart, tested for his great adventure going to Mars to go and make discoveries there. So we learn about rovers, we learn about Mars. Is particularly interested in the 2 main people who work on him. And these are interspersed by letters. These are from the daughter, and she's in elementary school, I think, when this starts, to her rover. It starts out as a project from the class, and she happens to know a fair amount about rovers herself, since her mom is probably the main person in charge of creating this rover. So we go through all of that, all the experience of getting to Mars, experience of figuring out how to work on Mars, difficulties there, etc., and so forth. Again, this is one that I enjoyed more than I thought I would. So there's that one. And then finally, I read What Katy Did by Susan Coolidge. This is similar to All of a Kind Family. It's kind of that same feel, except this is probably more of a farming community, I would imagine, or certainly not the big city at least. Anyway, Katy, I think she has, let's see, she has 3 sisters and 2 brothers. That's right, there are 6 of them total. And then there's a friend that comes over all the time to play. They don't have a mother anymore, so their Aunt Irene takes care of them, and she loves them, but doesn't necessarily know the best way of dealing with children, especially children as active as these, especially a child as active as Katy, who is, she has a good heart, but she does have a tendency to get into trouble just about whatever she does. It doesn't help that she's in the awkward stage too, which is definitely not what neat and proper Aunt Irene particularly likes. But we go with Katy on adventures, and one day something happens and everything changes, and Katy's life changes, and she's forced to learn some lessons whether she likes it or not. So I enjoyed this one. Uh, I'd probably have to say out of all of these, hard to say, but probably Romola is probably the best book so far this month, followed by The Tale of Despereaux and the Beatrix Prophecy. I also have been reading the first volumes of a number of manga, but I'm going to save that for a different one. I'll do all of those together, so look forward to that shortly. So, as you can see, a very nice start to middle grade March. I've been able to cross off a number of things, including the group read, so that is wonderful. I hope your March has been going just as well. What's your favorite thing you've read so far? I'd love to hear that. I'd love to hear if you're participating in middle grade March too. So until next time, I hope we all stay safe and healthy, and as always, happy reading!